Let's talk something financial. Let's start off talking about a subject that I received an email from a listener last week asking me about whether or not it's wise to pre-plan a funeral. Now, this is becoming more and more popular, and 20 years ago it wasn't a big deal, but nowadays more and more people are finding the need to plan their own funeral. Let's face it, the last thing you want to do when you pass away is leave your family to make all the arrangements in a time when they're not mentally or emotionally prepared to do so. If you could prepare everything, pre-plan everything, it makes life easier on your family. And there's some other financial reasons to do it as well. You lock in a price, so you don't have to worry about inflation. Inflation, we're all talking about inflation, and you buy it now, you prepay for it, you're going to be ahead of the game. You're going to lock in prices. So how do you do it? All right. Well, the way to do it, obviously, is almost every funeral home now offers pre-planning. So you go, you see a number of funeral homes, and then you ask them for their price list. It's called the Statement of Funeral Goods and Services, and it lists a list of everything that they have available for you. And you want to decide, what kind of coffin you want. Are you going to get cremated? What have you. Now, most people, when it comes to burial, they take care of that in advance. Many people have always had cemetery plots in the family or had made an arrangement for a mausoleum or something like that. That's the pre-planning that people used to do. And then they deal with the funeral later on. But now people are doing the pre-planning of the entire funeral. They're getting the cemetery plot. They're planning the funeral. And again, this makes a lot of sense. Because, look, your estate's going to pay for it sooner or later anyway. So why not pay it in advance? Another reason to do it, too, is if you think that you may have needs for Medicaid down the line, for long-term planning, for long-term care, nursing home, what have you, you're allowed to spend that money down on your funeral. So you don't spend it down on a nursing home, and then when you die, your family's responsible for paying your funeral. So you want to use the last bit of money you have to pay for that funeral. Makes a lot of sense. So you want to see a list of everything they have, what you want, and also you got to keep in mind that pre-planning your funeral. You're the guest of honor at your funeral. So why shouldn't you be involved in the decision-making process here? I think that makes a lot of sense, and you can make your final wishes known, by pre-planning it. Everything is already paid for. And I've known some family members recently, friends and family members that did pre-plan it, and it went so easy for the family afterwards. So what I would do is, unless you have a favorite funeral home that your family uses, go to a number of funeral homes, tell them you're considering pre-planning your funeral, and they will go over everything with you. But just realize cost isn't the number one concern here. That you have to compare apples with apples too, the quality of what you're getting. The average funeral right now costs about $10,000 in New Jersey, and it could be significantly lower, it could be significantly higher, obviously, depending on the services that you want. So figure out what you want before you even go. I mean, it's good to talk, if your spouse is still alive, to talk with your spouse. What do we want? What do we don't want? And then go there, and then you're pretty much pre-planned to do that. How do you want to be remembered? Do you want music played there? What kind of music? All this stuff you should take control of instead of having your family do it, again, at the time that they're least able to do it. What are some of the mistakes that people make with this? Well, they don't shop around. Well, the biggest mistake people make is just not planning it in the beginning. 63% of consumers in a poll said that they wanted to pre-plan matters for their funeral. Not necessarily pay for it in advance, but at least share with their family members what they want. And only 21% actually did so. And let's face it, who wants to, it's not the best topic in the world to be thinking about or talking about with your family. Is there, when I croak, what's going to happen to me? And a lot of people avoid this planning because they just don't want to think about it. Another mistake that people make is they wait until they're ill to do this. It's obviously better to do this before your health is declining, because when your health is declining, the last thing you really want to think about is your death, right? So it's best to do this. You're not going to do it when you're 50 years old. You're not going to do it probably when you're 60 years old. But still, you want to do it when you're relatively healthy towards the end of your life. What are the other some some of the mistakes people make. Forgetting that you have to balance everybody's needs in your family. Some people, some family members would really want something to happen at your funeral. Others may be offended by certain things. You got to look at your entire family and think, they're going to be there. You want them to leave that event with a proper feeling, that it had a meaningful and healing experience. Good things about it: New Jersey has a very, very good plan, and it's called Funeral Planning Choices. Choices is the brand name of it, and it's been around since 1981. There's 45,000 consumer accounts there, and what they do is when you pay money to the funeral director for your pre-paid funeral expenses, this money goes into this trust fund. The funeral director doesn't hold the money. Very, very shortly after you pay it, it goes to this New Jersey Choices Trust Fund. And in it, it's invested in FDIC jumbo CDs. Your money's commingled with everybody else's. And that's where it is. So you don't have to worry about, well, what if this funeral home goes under or whatever? Am I in trouble? The answer is not. No, you're not in trouble. Another thing that's very important, too, is that in New Jersey, these funds are portable. Meaning that if you change funeral homes, for whatever reason, or you move out of the state, those funds will travel with you. Also, you could just cash it in at any time. It earns interest on a small, what kind of interest you earn these days, but it earns some interest. And if you don't want to be in the program for some reason anymore, you can pull the funds out. Now, very few people do that, but you still have the option to do it. Or say that you're moving to another state, you say, you know what, I'm just going to take the money out and I'll pre-plan my funeral in the other state, as opposed to making it portable. So pre-planning a funeral, I think it's a really good idea for people to do. I think it's great for your family. I know people who've done it, and the family, I haven't heard any family say they weren't happy about it. That mom and dad pre-planned their funeral. It's one burden that you won't want to have to deal with. And I've done it a number of times in my life when I lost somebody very close to me, and I've had to go and plan a funeral, the day of their passing. And it's just a very stressful, very emotional thing to do. And if you could prevent your family, your kids from having to go through that, that's a really good thing. Now, I was mentioning in the past, we were talking about estate planning, and people are always asking me, do I need a lawyer for my estate? And the answer is sometimes you do. But most of the times, I don't think you do. Nowadays, there's so many resources online that allow you to do a will, a power of attorney, or a living will without using an attorney and paying attorney's fees for it. So what are some of the good places online that you can go? There's a number of legal services online, and they're all pretty good. Let's start with LegalShield. LegalShield is the best overall online place, depending on what you need for it. It's good for families, it's good for business. It has a lot of things there, but it's not cheap. Well, it's relatively cheap. Membership fees start at $25 a month. They can go as high as $50 a month for small businesses. But here, you get unlimited consultations and legal document reviews with a licensed attorney. You'll also benefit from estate planning services, traffic violations, family law, tax audits. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. There's no long-term commitment. You can cash it in and you can stop paying at any time. But if you're just looking for documents, you're looking to do a will, or you need a power of attorney, and you don't want to employ a full-time attorney to do it, I like LegalZoom. LegalZoom.com is a really good resource, and you can get documents for starting at $29. And this is not a subscription service. It is just to get a document. And I did my will on LegalZoom.com. So you could do that. It's very, very easy to do. If you want a full attorney review, you want to have a little consultation and have the attorney review your documents at LegalZoom. It's $179 a person, or $279 for two people. Now, two people, if you go to a full attorney, an estate planning attorney, Could be as much as $1,000 each. So for $279, that's pretty good. But say you do need an attorney for whatever reason. There's a great resource online. It's called Find Law, FINDLAW.com, and you put in your zip code and what area of legal services you need, and a whole list of local attorneys that specialize in that area come up, and you can call them and have a consultation with them. So there's a lot of legal resources online. There's so many of them that I can't even name. I'm just giving you the top few that come up on the search. But LegalZoom is the one to do. So why would you want to pay? You want to draw up a will. Just follow the prompts. Go to LegalZoom.com. Get the will template, or get the power of attorney template, or get the living will template, and you can do it yourself. It really, really is not that difficult. You know, my estate's a little more complicated than most that I see. I was able to do it in an hour. It wasn't really complicated at all. Now, if you want trusts and complicated things like that, that's a different story. Now you're going to employ an attorney, and usually when you need that kind of stuff, trust and so forth, you have the assets to be able to afford an attorney. So go pay for one then if that's the case. But for the average person, just needs a will, just needs a power of attorney. I had a client come in this week that wanted a power of attorney. You know, could I refer them to a lawyer? I said, you really don't need to do that. You know, as a matter of fact, actually, you could walk in Staples and get a template and fill out a power of attorney, have it notarized and witnessed, and you got yourself a valid power of attorney. Whereas if you called an attorney and you did it with them, who knows what it would cost you. So LegalZoom.com is the first place I look. That's the place that I always go when I need legal documents. All right, this week they announced on Friday the October payrolls, new jobs created in October, and it was a surprising beat. 531,000 jobs were created in the United States in October. Now, if you recall, we've had some pretty disappointing numbers in August and September, but I knew sooner or later, once the federal government stopped giving extra unemployment to everybody, that we'd start seeing those numbers go up again as people say, okay, you know, I got everything I could out of this stimulus, let me go back to work. And we're starting to see that. And of course, we know that employers are looking for employees, so it's not hard to find a job if you want one. Also, they revised the numbers up for September by 71,000, and they've adjusted up by 88,000 August. So that's the thing about these government numbers. They're always adjusted and changed, and you never know what it really is. The unemployment rate dropped from 4.8% to 4.6%. But one thing that's very concerning in these numbers, and has been for quite a long time now, is what's called the labor participation rate. That was unchanged at 61.6%. Now, what does that mean? You know, the labor participation rate means what percent of Americans are actually working. And that number has been steadily going down. And it's been going down for a number of reasons. The most important reason is that the baby boomers are retiring. So these people that were in the workforce are now retiring and leaving the workforce, never to come back, you know, unless they're struggling and they have to go to work as a cashier somewhere or something like that. But we're seeing more and more people, you know, decide to retire, and we saw a big jump in that in the last couple of years with the COVID, where people said, "Look, I'm close to retirement anyway. You know, I've had it. I've been working from home anyway. Let me just pack it in." So we're seeing an acceleration of people retiring, and that's affecting the labor participation rate. Also, new births over the last 20 years. The number of children that families are having has been steadily declining. So obviously when you have less children, you're going to have less future workers, and we're starting to see that now. So this simply means that 40%, or you know, almost 40% of the people in the country are getting money somewhere else. They're getting money from the government, either in the form of Social Security, in the form of unemployment, in the form of welfare of some kind. Which in a country that's right now running a $3.5 trillion deficit and it's almost $30 trillion in debt, that's a problem. And it's expected that this will continue. 10,000, I bet you it's higher now, people a day are going into Social Security and Medicare. 10,000 people a day. Now that's net. That's new. That includes people who are dying off. The net amount is 10,000 people a day. And think about the numbers there that they're getting in Social Security and Medicare and healthcare and everything else. And that's why the country is in the state that it is right now, financially. We're broke. Nobody wants to admit it, but we're broke. Federal Reserve met this week, and everybody was anticipating this meeting. What are they going to do? What are they going to say? Are they going to talk about interest rates? Are they going to talk about stopping the QE? And the Federal Reserve came out and kind of surprised markets a little bit and said it's going to begin tapering its quantitative easing bond buying stimulus program starting in November this month, reducing purchases by $15 billion from $120 billion to $105 billion this month. And they said the size of the reductions, each month in the future is going to depend on economic conditions. So they always give themselves that out, where they say, okay, we're going to start tapering, but hey, wait a second, we can't. If the market starts going down 3%, they'll step back and they'll say we can't do that. If we start seeing interest rates going up dramatically in the bond market, they're going to stop doing it. They're going to go back to the full boat, $120 billion a month. And but if they do what they're leaning to do, they should be at zero by June or July. But I find it hard to believe that they can do it. I really do, because who's going to be the buyer of U.S. Treasury bonds? It's been the Federal Reserve. So if they're not buying it, one or two things has to happen. Somebody else has to step up and buy it, like China. They're not going to do it. Russia has zero treasuries at this point. They're not going to do it. Americans don't have any money to do it. Or interest rates are going to go up dramatically in the bond market, which will finally start attracting capital out of the stock market and other places where finally we can get a return. So I don't see how the Federal Reserve can do it. If they stop buying, interest rates go up across the board. That means mortgage rates go up. That means housing prices go down. That means financing rates of everything go up. So they're talking a good game right now. The question is, are they really going to follow through with it? Now, the Federal Reserve, as you know, has so much power in this country. Too much power, in my opinion, because they control everything. Think about now. We're living in an inflationary spiral right now. It's because of them. It's because of their policies. They work for the banks. They don't work for you. The Federal Reserve has engineered the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind since 2008. Well, what did they do? They took away all the interest from savers and bondholders and gave it all to the rich stockholders and speculators on Wall Street. And made the rich richer, richer and richer, the billionaires billions and billions of dollars, while everybody else has got nothing. How's that CD paying you? How's that 10-year Treasury bond paying you at 1.5%? Well, at the same time, they've created an inflation problem where the cost of everything is now going up 6 to 15%, whatever figure you want to use. So now you're earning nothing, and everything's going up. And the Biden administration says it's a high-class problem. They don't have any problems, believe me. But a retired widow on fixed income is feeling that has a little bit of savings that can't earn anything. The saving. Now, I've mentioned this in the past. There's a book out there that was written, I think, in 1991. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And it was written by G. Edward Griffin. And it's about the formation of the Federal Reserve and how it was done in secret I think it was 1912, 1913. And all these bankers got together on the island of Jekyll Island, which is off the coast of Georgia, and spent a couple of days there formulating how they were going to put together their banking cartel. And they did it, and they were able to go to Congress and push some senators, Congress critters, to approve it, and they established the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which really should be the Banking Cartel Act. So this guy, G. Edward Griffin, who wrote this book on it, he was being interviewed on Stansberry Research this past week, and he was talking about the Fed and what they are and how bad they are and what he thinks they're going to do next, which is pretty scary. I'm going to play part of the interview.
Well, okay, the role it should not be playing in people's lives is the role it is playing, of course. What is that role? And it's hard to describe, because if they just say it bluntly, most people will look at you like you're some kind of a tinfoil hat person. But I'm used to that, so I don't mind that look as long as I have a moment or two to explain. So what's the role it's playing? It's playing the role of our masters. And that's what do you mean? The Federal Reserve is our master. Who have heard of such a thing? It's a government agency, isn't it? Well, no, it's not a government agency. So what is it? And this leads you down the rabbit hole. The Federal Reserve System is a cartel. It's no different than no different than an oil cartel or banana cartel. It's a banking cartel. And that's a kind of a shocker to most people, to realize that the system that's controlling our money, that issues our money in the name of the nation, is a private institution, completely a private institution. And if you understand the history, its origins going way back to 1910 through 1913, during the period when they were selling the concept to Congress and to the American people, during that time, these bankers got together and decided that they needed to intervene in Congress, because Congress was getting a lot of pressure from the people to produce a bill and a law to control those big bad banks. They're ruining the economy. Their banks were folding. People were losing their investments. They had their money in the banks, and the banks were folding. They lost everything they had. And there was a hue and cry for banking reform bill. So the bankers decided wisely that, hey, if we're going to have a banking reform bill, what are we going to do? Just sit around and wait and see how it turns out? No. Let's have a meeting and let's figure out how we can write the banking reform bill to our best interests. And that's what they did. And that, of course, is the lead up to the name for my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, because Jekyll Island is a real island. It's off the coast of Georgia. And back in those days, it was a resort. Well, still is a resort island, but in those days, it was an exclusive resort island.
So he's talking about the beginnings of the Federal Reserve. Sorry for the background noise. That was my granddaughter or my wife yelling at her or something when I was recording it this morning. A little background noise. But he goes on to talk about it was a lengthy interview. It was, I think it was over 30 minutes. But the most interesting and frightening thing he talked about is what the Federal Reserve is going to morph into. Not what it's been, because what it's been has been a horrible banking cartel. It's basically robbed the purchasing power of the country. I mean, since 1913, when the Federal Reserve established itself, we've lost 97% of the value of the dollar. So they've systematically have destroyed the wealth of the nation. And just think about it. They have the right to print money. The Constitution never said that. The Constitution says the Treasury has the right to mint coin and currency. But they stole that through legislation. And now outside banks can control the money and create the money. So they print it out of thin air. They don't answer to anybody. And they can cause deflation, inflation, employment, unemployment. And they control interest rates. They have a tremendous amount of power, but listen to what he says this is going. This is the scary part.
What will it be? Well, they're transitioning now as hard as they can to a new monetary system where people like us, or ordinary people around the world, we won't have money in our pockets. There'll only be a digital currency, and it'll be a central bank digital currency. It's not like Bitcoin or some private coin. These would be nationally issued and internationally sanctioned currencies, and they're digital currencies, not an awful lot different from credit card money, which is digital also. But in this case, once they achieve their goal, there will be no more credit cards, so to speak. All private systems of money would be replaced by this one monopolistic, one world, literally, a monetary system, and it would be totally controlled by the banks, not by the governments. And every transaction you make, all the way from buying a packet of gum, to buying a car, to making an endowment to somebody, anything of any size, will have to go through the currency of the digital currency owned by the central banks. Now, I'll come to the end of that one. What's so different about that? Well, the difference is that you have no other place to go, and you will never have control of your own money without permission of the banks, because it has to clear through their computers. And if they don't like you for any reason, and I can think of a few that they might not like me, they could just throw a switch, and I won't be able to have any money for anything, which puts me out in the street with my hat on the sidewalk begging for food and donations to my overhead.
So that's what he's talking about, political control, basically, and they could just turn you off. Or they could not allow you to do certain transactions with certain individuals or certain businesses. What if all of a sudden they just turn off the ability to buy anything from a gun manufacturer or an ammo manufacturer, just for an example? They could just shut off the ability to do that. They can control your behavior. And that's it. The theme, that's going on in this country and the world right now is they want to control everything about you, including your health and everything, your money and everything. So this is what's happening. We have this powers that be that are doing everything in their power, and they have a lot of it, to try to control you. And this is where it's going. And there's no doubt about it. I've been reading about this digital currency stuff for a while now. And it's going to happen. And money is going to be obsolete. And your ability to purchase things is going to be out of your control. Now, he goes on to talk about the importance of having assets outside of the banking system, and namely precious metals.
That's the change I'm talking about. And so, yeah, back to your question, do we need assets outside of that system? Absolutely. What are the best assets? Well, that's another issue, and I have my own views on that. I'm really not a good investment manager. I understand the mechanisms, but people have different opinions. But I don't see how you can beat the bullion market, silver and gold. It's pretty time-tested. So when in doubt, go with what's been tested, I would say.
Right, so owning physical gold, physical silver, and be outside the banking system?
Absolutely. That's it. That's the short answer, isn't it? Right there. Own something physical. Anything physical, actually, as long as it's marketable. I often joke about the idea that with the coming crisis, let's call it, but we're always in a crisis. That word is even worn out now. The coming catastrophe in the economy, maybe it would be a good idea if you had the reserves to buy a warehouse of cheap white wine, for example.
All right, so he's talking about the importance of being out of the system with some of your money anyway, because, again, sooner or later, you may have difficulty spending the money the way you want to. Pretty scary, totalitarian, Orwellian times we're living in. Let's take a break. 732-505-1160 is my call-in number. My name's Lou Scatigna. Don't go away.